The first day of school at Westfield High was usually a mix of chaos and excitement, but this year something felt different. The corridors buzzed with whispers about the new substitute teacher, Ms. Rivera. Nobody knew much about her, except that she was quiet, reserved, and had transferred from some school far away. She was petite, soft-spoken, and walked into her first class with a stack of books, wearing a warm smile that almost seemed too gentle for the rough crowd she was about to face. And among that crowd were the three most feared troublemakers in school: Brett, Kyle, and Mason. They weren't just bullies, they thrived on humiliation. To them, teachers were just obstacles to mock and break down. By the third day, their targets had shifted squarely onto Ms. Rivera. It started small: sarcastic comments under their breath, snickering while she spoke, tossing paper balls at the back of the classroom. She ignored them at first, hoping her calm would set the tone. But they mistook her kindness for weakness. One afternoon, while Ms. Rivera was writing equations on the board, Brett leaned back in his chair and muttered loudly, "Bet she wouldn't last a week here." Kyle laughed. Mason smirked. And when she turned to ask them to be quiet, Brett stood, swaggered over, and without warning, slapped the folder out of her hands so it scattered papers all over the floor. The class froze. A teacher being disrespected like that. That was shocking enough. But then came the real gasp. Brett smirked and gave her a light, mocking slap on the arm. It wasn't enough to hurt, but it was meant to humiliate her in front of everyone. Ms. Rivera bent down, collected her papers, and stood up slowly. Her eyes were calm, but there was a subtle shift in her posture, a confidence that hadn't been there before. "Brett," she said softly, "you've made a mistake." Brett laughed. "Or what? You gonna cry?" She didn't answer. Instead, she walked toward him. And then, in a blur, she moved. In one smooth motion, she redirected his arm, stepped to the side, and had him locked in a harmless but unbreakable hold before he could blink. The class erupted into gasps. Brett's eyes went wide, not from pain, but from shock. She released him instantly. "That was restraint," she said calmly. "You don't want to see what happens when I'm not restraining myself." Nobody spoke. Miss Rivera turned to the stunned classroom. "Before I was a teacher," she said, "I spent 15 years training in martial arts and teaching self-defense to women who were told they couldn't stand up for themselves." Her voice didn't shake, but there was a quiet weight behind her words. "I came here to teach math, but I will not stand by and let cruelty rule this room." For the rest of the period, not a single voice interrupted her. Even Brett, red-faced, sat quietly. But the story didn't end there. The next day, Brett, Kyle, and Mason came into class without their usual grins. They were subdued. At lunch, Brett actually approached Ms. Rivera in the teacher's lounge. Sorry," he muttered, barely making eye contact. Ms. Rivera studied him for a moment before replying. "Brett, I'm not looking for perfection. I'm looking for change." And over the next weeks, something remarkable happened. She started a voluntary after-school self-defense club, inviting anyone, bullies included, to learn. At first, only a few girls signed up, but word spread, and one surprising afternoon, Brett and Kyle showed up. They didn't say why. They didn't apologize again. But they came back every week. Through the classes, they learned discipline, respect, and the difference between strength and intimidation. Mason eventually joined, too, and slowly, the sneers and snickers disappeared from their behavior in class. By the end of the semester, the boys were not just better students. They were different people. One Friday afternoon, as they left practice, Brett lingered and said quietly, "Thanks for not giving up on us." Ms. Rivera smiled. "Everyone has a choice, Brett. You just decided to make the right one." That day, The class learned more than math or martial arts. They learned that real strength isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about how you choose to use it. And Ms. Rivera, she didn't just teach equations. She taught respect, resilience, and the courage to stand up for what's right, even if you have to take a stand alone at first.